I've recently wanted to actually get back into playing around with some more old components. Now, to do that, I thought we'd pick back up with our tech catch-up because, as you know, if you follow this channel, we missed many years of building PCs, and I thought why not do that by actually putting a build together that would demonstrate something that's reasonably entry level now and a little bit older. Now, the platform we're going to be focusing on is the Intel 4th Gen, so this is the CPU that we've got for this, and I thought let's put together the build and we'll see what it can actually still do. Okay, so as you can see from the table, we've got many different parts, and I managed to actually bundle all of this out of the boxes that we've got stored away in inventory in the studio. And to be honest, we actually managed to find a complete PC. The focus of this build, though, is going to be around this CPU. So this is a 4th Gen Intel processor. It's nothing high-end, and it wasn't back in the day. It's actually an Intel Core i5-4460. Now, this is a 4-core 4-thread processor, and it is nearly 10 years old, so I'm not really holding too much hopes up for it, but it does have a base clock speed of 3.2 GHz, and it is built on the Haswell architecture. So we're going to actually put this into a system, and we're going to see what kind of thing it can do. Now, I totally missed the 4th generation, but we will need some specific parts. For the motherboard, I've actually got one of these. Now, this is probably a pretty basic motherboard, to be honest. It's a H81N, and it is a mini ITX board. I actually managed to pick this up a few months ago, brand new from eBay for just £50. I wouldn't recommend anybody going out there and doing that, particularly for a board which is pretty reasonably low end, even for its time. But I needed an ITX board, and having a brand new one was fantastic for the studio. So that's what we're going to be building it into, and that's going to form the core of this build, particularly with the CPU. Now, of course, 4th Gen Intel isn't a DDR4 system. We would need to use some DDR3, and for that, we do actually have some in the studio in the form of these Corsair sticks. Now, this is Corsair Vengeance 1600 MHz. Would have been nice to have something a little bit faster, but this is what we've got. And altogether, there's 2 8s there, so that makes 16 GB. Probably more than people would have used back in the day with this 4th Gen Intel processor, particularly being an i5. We're actually looking at more of a mid-tier kind of system for the day. But nowadays, it's actually super cheap to pick these up. You can actually pick these up for less than £10. And that's generally because, being a mid-range CPU, you find them in a lot of office PCs. It isn't a K processor, it's nothing special. So hopefully the rest of this gear kind of goes with it well. In terms of storage, we also have a gigabyte SSD. Now, the motherboard doesn't have anything like M.2 slots. It's quite early, and being a basic model, it's not going to have anything like that. So we're stuck with a SATA SSD, and fortunately, I managed to find this one. This is a 1TB gigabyte SSD. The fact that this board is gigabyte and the SSD is gigabyte is just a coincidence, really. There's no real matching there, but it was nice to actually find that. And then it comes to the graphics card. For the graphics card, we've opted to try this one. Now, this is the GeForce GTX 1060. I actually really love this graphics card. I managed to pick it up during the GPU crisis from a friend for a pretty reasonable price. They are much cheaper than that now, so you can actually pick these up for about £60, but this one came boxed. It was like new, and it is a dual fan system, so it's pretty good. It is a 6 GB version card, and it wasn't released when this CPU originally was, but it would have been a great upgrade path for many people once it was released, particularly on that kind of platform. So I can kind of guess that a lot of people were actually using this kind of graphics card with this CPU. And to be honest, looking at the stats out there, probably a lot of other people still are. So we'll also be able to get to see what kind of performance they're getting and see if they can actually play some more modern games. I'm sure we'll get to that point at some point in the video. For the case, I've opted to go for this one. It is a mini ITX case, and it's something that we've had lingering around the studio since we ever repaired it. We actually purchased this case for £30 on eBay, and it is an NZXT H210. I actually really love this type of mini tower, and I haven't really been able to let go of the case. It's got pretty much all the features you need, including USB-C, which is pretty cool. It is obviously much more modern than the system, but I think it's going to be nice actually fitting an older system into a nice modern case, give it a nice refreshed look, so that's going to be pretty cool. In terms of additional cooling, what I'm going to be actually fitting on this is this Xiaomi Light 220mm AIO. There's absolutely no reason why I'm actually doing that. We could get away with just a stock cooler, cooler, but I think it's going to look cool. I'm not going to activate the RGB. We're going to keep this system as a complete RGB free system because I think that kind of goes back with the era that it would have been in. Not that it really matters, but for the power supply, we're going to go for this Cooler Master 550 watt. It is more than enough to power this CPU as well as this graphics card, but if you're going to try and put anything more higher powered in there, you probably want to bump this up to a 650. The only reason we're using this really is because it is a fully modular power supply that I actually paid around £35 for a long time ago, and I'm sure you guys can actually see right now compared to the prices of power supplies now, I got this for pretty much a bargain. Now, because I missed a big section out in PC gaming, 4th gen, 3rd gen, 1st gen, that kind of Intel core processors were all the generations that I missed out. We've previously looked at the 2nd gen and 3rd gen, and they've kind of really come to the end of their life now, but I have no idea what the 4th gen is actually going to offer. Is it any better than the 3rd gen? I'm not quite sure. Obviously it was a change of platform because this uses a different socket to the 2nd and 3rd gen, and then the socket after this one was changed again, so it kind of moved, I think, up to the 6th generation. I have had a little play with them, but nothing really extensive. So this is going to actually be quite fun to see what kind of performance people are getting, if they're still running these kind of CPUs, and as well if it actually makes sense to even build anything like this, because this kind of system is actually going to be so cheap to do. If we consider the graphics card now, you can pick up for like 60 quid, £50 for a motherboard. You can pick these processors up for way less than £10. I think you could probably get one for like £3 from CEX or something like that. SSDs, doesn't really matter what brand you're going to go for, what speed when it comes to a system like this. You can pick these up super cheap now, around £25 for a 1 terabyte of an unbranded kind of thing. And DDR3 is not as expensive as it used to be. You could actually pick up 16 gigabytes of this, and it doesn't have to be super fancy for pretty cheap. So all in all, you could probably actually build this system for around maybe £250. So it's going to be interesting to see what you can actually do with a full system, which basically costs the same as an entry-level graphics cards now. So I think the next thing that we need to do is obviously put this system together. We'll do a quick little benchmark, show you guys what it can kind of do in something synthetic, and then we'll have a go at playing some games. So actually it wasn't too bad of a system to put together. It's pretty cool looking. It's pretty modern looking now, even though it's a 4th gen Intel. And I'm hoping that it actually works. So let's just hit the button and see if it actually boots. So everything seems to be moving. We'll mash this delete key, see if we can get into the BIOS at least. Thinking about something. Monitor's activating. And we're into the BIOS. So the BIOS actually looks pretty nice on this motherboard. I've never actually booted this motherboard. It's brand new and I haven't actually played with anything really this old, but it's a gigabyte motherboard and the BIOS looks pretty nice. It seems to have lots and lots of settings. We're not going to really play anything on here. We'll exit it off and what we'll do is we'll install a Windows drive and we'll see if we can get it to actually boot into Windows. With the Windows drive in there, it's actually booted straight into Windows. There doesn't seem to be any kind of issues. In Windows, it looks actually pretty good. It's currently running in a 1080p resolution. It's a 1080p monitor, so of course it will. System's pretty quiet, nothing really going on there, and it actually feels quite snappy. I was quite surprised at the speed that everything seems to open at, particularly with this older CPU. Little 4-core, 4-thread processor from, well, nearly 10 years ago now. It's like 9.5 years old now, and it still seems to be performing pretty well, especially when we're in Windows. But what we need to do now is we'll install a couple of things. We'll get some games on there. We'll get a benchmark. We'll get MSI Afterburner on so you guys can actually see some of the results of the performance. And then I suppose we'll just give it a bit of a go. Now, everything seems to be working beautifully. Temps are looking pretty low. On the graphics card, we've got obviously the NVIDIA GeForce GTX 1060 6GB. It's currently at about 64 degrees, and if we have a look at our overlay as well, so it's currently running around 65 degrees. It's actually pretty warm in the room as well, so that's not doing too bad. And the CPU with this little 120mm AIO seems to be doing fairly well. It's currently at about 45 degrees. Now it is, I believe, around an 85 watt processor, which seems a little bit insane really, considering that, you know, your more modern Ryzen processors, which are way more powerful than this, can generally put out, you know, 65 watts TDP. But yeah, for an oldie and 85 watts roughly, it's not doing too bad when it comes to temperatures. We're not really using a lot of the CPU. If we look at some of the stats at the top, we're currently using around 33% of the i5 processor. But we are maxing out the GTX 1060, which is extremely interesting to know because obviously that graphics card is much newer. But if you'd have actually fitted that graphics card as an upgrade back on a system like this, you've got plenty of space to be able to do it. And it's quite surprising how long these older CPUs have actually lasted. The benchmark itself is still running. It's reasonably smooth. Nothing is really going on, but we'll wait to the end and we'll see what kind of scores we get. Now the benchmark is coming to the end, and I will admit, even though we've maintained a pretty decent average frames per second of around 93, and it's currently running at about 100, something like that actively, we did see a few little stutters when we were actually watching the benchmark go round, which caused our 1% lows to completely drop down. So 1% lows are 1 FPS and the 0.1% are 0. That actually goes to show how those kind of figures sometimes are not accurate, particularly when people are benchmarking, because just for one little stutter in the gameplay, those will actually drop all the way down. And we didn't notice it to start with. It was just a little bit of a jitter and we were wondering, did that actually stutter or not? And then we noticed it a little bit more later on. So of course, you're going to get those kind of issues, particularly with an older CPU like this. Looking at our results here, I'm not really sure what we're looking at, but we've got an average FPS of 93.5, pretty decent, more than playable if it was a game. We've got a score of 2,355. Not 100% sure if that's good or bad, to be honest, because I haven't really used this benchmark in quite a while. Minimum FPS of 9 and a maximum of 195.6. So I think if you look at the averages of FPSs, they're pretty decent, but I'm not really sure about the score. But anyway, let's close this and we'll see what we can game at. The first actual game we're going to try is Doom Eternal. It generally runs pretty well on most hardware, and the GTX 1060 should be more than enough to cope with it. We'll stick to a 1080p resolution. We'll make sure that vertical sync is disabled, and we'll go down all the way down to the settings. So overall quality is low. Let's bump that up to an ultra setting. Now I know this game is extremely well optimized, but even on this system with an older generation processor, nearly 10 years old, the game actually loaded really quick. It just took a couple of seconds to get in there, but let's jump into the game and actually give it a bit of a play, reset some stats. So we're currently running at an average of 88-90 frames per second. Not sure, I'm probably going to die doing this, but we'll see what happens. And we've got a 1% low of 67. The game looks pretty stunning, so it should do in an ultra setting. It's not bad at all. So I think we can kind of count this as one of the games that you could actually play pretty genuinely on this older system. Anybody that's got one of these still hanging around, you can get away with it. Even with a super cheap graphics card like this, it just seems to work. But I suppose we'll try something a little bit more demanding and see what kind of experience you're going to get, or what you can actually get, and how you can tune a different type of game. So we've started Cyberpunk 2077 and everything seems to be going smoothly so far. The game is actually just loading up. It loaded again really quick, just like Doom Eternal. In the menus, we're getting 85 frames per second. I assume that the menus are pretty locked to that, but we'll skip into the game, or at least get to the settings. We'll get to the configuration and we'll see what we're actually running at. We go to settings, graphics, or let's go to video first. So 1080p, VSync is turned off, that's fine. Graphics currently are set to ultra, but we're going to change that. We're going to put it on a high setting. We're going to turn off Fidelity FX Super Resolution at the moment because we don't want any help. We want to actually see what this kind of setup can do natively, but we always do have the option if we need to for something like FSR to actually give it a little bit of a boost. But for now, we'll just scan down here. There's no ray tracing enabled. We'll hit apply and then we'll just give the game a bit of a go. We'll get straight into the game. We won't bother with the benchmark, so we'll see what happens. So the game is actually loaded, and unlike Doom Eternal, we're hitting a little bit of an issue straight away. We're currently running at around 30 frames per second, and we're not actually even moving. If we start to drive, things are gonna start to get choppy, and as you can tell, it's getting pretty stuttery out there. Our 1% lows at the moment are 8 FPS, and we haven't had no major drops, so it's clearly what's happening on the screen. There you go, it's suddenly stuttered down to about 11 frames per second. This game is obviously too much for this system. The CPU is currently maxed out at 100%, so it's quite a CPU intensive game, as well as the GTX 1060, that is also maxed out as well. But we'll have a look at the settings and we'll see what we can do to kind of see if we can get it a little bit higher. Maybe we'll drop the preset down, jump into the settings now. We'll go to graphics. Quick preset is currently on custom. What we'll do is we'll set it to a medium and we'll turn off FSR again. We'll see what happens. Click apply, go back to the game, reset our stats. We've increased slightly. We're currently now at 33 frames per second. It's as if the presets don't even actually do anything because the game still looks pretty damn stunning, to be honest. We've still got a good stutter going on, but I mean, the game is reasonably playable. If you really wanted to play this game like this, you could get away with it. I can't actually see at the moment why you couldn't. I mean, you are going to be quite limited to the performance you're going to be getting, and our frame time graph is all over the place, but it doesn't seem to reflect into the gameplay as much. And of course, if you've got a super old system like this, you might not want to spend hundreds and hundreds of pounds to be able to build something to play Cyberpunk, so you accept what you get. We'll see if we can do anything else. Of course, we've got the option of something like FSR. So let's just jump that on. We'll boost it up to a balanced setting. We'll see what balance does, if anything. We'll see if it actually gives us any kind of control back. But let's go back and reset those stats. We've increased it again just a little bit now. Well, it's actually going down a little bit more, but we're averaging 33 frames per second. You can actually start to tell the quality in the picture or quality of the game. The fidelity is actually being affected quite a lot by FSR. It's a lot more pixelated. It's not looking as smooth as it was before, and to be honest, we've gained pretty much no performance. So running FSR even in a balanced setting with the GTX 1060 isn't really helping. But the CPU seems to be the biggest bottleneck here. The CPU is currently running at around 100%, whereas the GTX 1060, since enabling FSR, it's actually creeped down a bit to around 60-70%. So it's clearly that CPU is the issue, but it still has a reasonably playable game. So that's actually quite interesting to see, and I was quite shocked at how this little system has performed. I didn't expect it to perform as well as it actually did. I didn't think you'd even really get into Cyberpunk 2077 and make any kind of, gameplay. I thought it was going to be completely, totally stuttery, just like it was when we were in the high settings, but even worse. And clearly in medium settings, it still looks pretty reasonable, and you could still probably play it. So I think what we'll do with this system is we're going to keep it around. I'm not sure whether we actually give it a new CPU. Maybe we go up to a 4th gen i7 and see if there's any kind of major difference. Or maybe we will swap out some of the games, maybe something that isn't as CPU demanding, but maybe GPU demanding, just like Doom Eternal was, where it kind of maxed out the GTX 1060. And we'll try an even newer graphics card, something bigger, see if we can really push the CPU in a different type of game. But apart from that, we'll have a look and figure out what to do. And obviously for that one, you guys are going to have to wait. So don't forget to subscribe to the channel if you like this kind of content, and also drop this video a like if you want us to do more kind of videos like this, where we take some old kit, build it into a system, and show you guys what it can and potentially can't do. And I'm sure we will catch you all in the next one.